Let's go ahead and get this started with a little about me, the podcast, and some exciting new content coming along with it. You are listening to the Lakescape Photography Podcast. Hey everyone, and welcome to the Lakescape Photography Podcast, the landscape photography podcast of the Great Lakes. I'm your host, Nicholas Albert, and I am excited to be releasing the all-new podcast and announcing some exciting new things ahead. I'm going to go ahead and kick this off with some introductions, share a little bit about myself, the podcast, and some exciting new content that's coming out alongside of it. My roots run deep here in the Great Lakes, going back to my grandparents settling in Thunder Bay, Ontario, after immigrating to Canada from Stockholm, Sweden. My father was born and raised in Thunder Bay and spent his childhood living right on the shorelines of the Big Lake. In time, my grandparents, along with my father and his brother George, immigrated to the United States, but chose to stay in the region, settling in northern Illinois, where I currently reside today. My father chose to take up roots here in Illinois, and that's where my story begins. I've been a landscape photographer for a little over 20 years. In that time, I've traveled from the West Coast to the East Coast and back again. Through all of my travels, though, the Great Lakes have always remained my favorite place, and I am proud to call them home. I've always thought of them as America's best-kept secret, an underrated area full of incredible landscapes, waterways, people, and history. I consider myself fortunate to be a landscape photographer in this region, and I'm thankful to belong to such an incredible place and honored to have the privilege of representing the Great Lakes right here on this podcast. Having lived here my entire life, I have a fondness for the lakes, a connection, a passion to explore and discover the incredible places that make them so beautiful and diverse. I've been in the great outdoors since I was basically in diapers. My parents took me camping and hiking in my early years. I even experienced my first camping trip before I was 1. My late father was an outdoorsman, and by the ripe young age of 4, I began accompanying him on his adventures into the wilderness. Campgrounds and weekend hikes were a staple of my childhood. As I grew older at my father's side, we spent our weekends hiking, backpacking, fishing, and experiencing nature. During our trips together, my father would share the stories of his youth on Lake Superior and the hikes he and his brothers had taken in the Great Lakes. They hiked the many trails of Michigan, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Ontario together. Inspired by his stories, experiences, and passion for the outdoor experience, I committed to hiking the same trails and parks that they had hiked before me. This set the foundation for who I am today. As I grew older and my adventures reached further and my hikes grew longer, I soon realized that the great outdoors was where I belonged. In time, I started carrying a camera with me. I started with a Minolta Maxim 400 SI film camera, which was a gift from my father. He was also a photographer and captured many landscapes and railroad scenes right here in the Great Lakes. This is where many of our adventures together began in my youth. I still remember lugging the camera bag around and carrying his tripod and hiking along the many railways of the Great Lakes, seeking out unique scenes and learning the history of the region. A model railroader, his passion was modeling the railways of the Upper Peninsula, Minnesota, and Wisconsin. A few of his favorites were the Iron Mountain Railroad, the Milwaukee Road, the Chicago and Northwestern, and the Lake Superior and Ishpeming Railroad. He would shoot various landscapes and then incorporate what he had captured into the train layout that he had built in my childhood home. It was incredible to see him taking these images and bringing them to life in such a unique and creative way. Ultimately, his work inspired me to hone my craft and learn photography beyond the surface. As my understanding of photography grew, so did my desire to craft better photographs. I was paying attention to the light and its qualities. I was finding natural lines and forms in the landscape. I learned the importance of reading and anticipating conditions. I began noticing the subjects that spoke to me, but most importantly, I started noticing the moments that defined my adventures. As I fell in love with photography, though, I never let it become the driving force behind spending time in nature. For me, it has never been about photography. It's purely about that outdoor experience. Photography was just an extension of that experience, a way of documenting and memorializing those moments that defined my adventures. The opportunity to encounter nature firsthand in an intimate setting and be present in the fleeting moments that define the subjects that speak to me. That is what calls me back into the wilderness. The photos are just a really nice bonus. Now, I would love to say I'm a natural born photographer, but I don't believe that that's entirely true. I admit that I have a God given talent, and I'm blessed to live the life that I live. But I believe more so that I'm a natural born explorer that just so happens to have a gift. It has always been my appreciation of God's creation that led me out the door. Today, I still shoot film from time to time, but I did transition to digital photography in 2009. I have plans to add a medium format film camera to my ever-growing collection in time, but more on that in a later episode. I've dedicated my body of work to the Great Lakes and the landscapes that define them. The places that inspired my father inspire me. The same places that I grew up hiking and learning about through my father's passion for the outdoors and the adventures that I accompanied him on. Recognizing how much my father's stories and passions inspired me and shaped my life, I understand the power of inspiration and sharing what you are passionate about. Guided by my father's gift of inspiration, my own adventures, and the many hikes and moments I have experienced, a podcast was born. I want to make this more than just another photography podcast, though. I want to provide something of value for all experience levels, hobbyist or pro. I want to craft this into something beautiful, inspiring, and educational. A place to listen to other people's stories, techniques, and experiences. Somewhere to find inspiration just as I found inspiration from my father. A place to discuss landscape photography and the many challenges, techniques, and approaches that make it so rewarding. In future episodes, I will be joined by guests from all over the Great Lakes. We are going to discuss everything from scouting and hikes to complex concepts and principles. We will be joined by hikers, backpackers, land stewards, authors, scholars, and adventurers alike to share their stories, experiences, and love for this region. We will discuss conservation with those leading movements and projects to protect the places that we love. We will talk about photography gear, hiking equipment, and best practices for planning your adventures into the wilderness. There are many exciting discussions, moments, and stories ahead. Of course, I plan to share my stories and experiences on the lakes too. From desktop recon to preparing for a trip, field techniques, and post-processing, I plan to cover it all right here on the Lakescape Photography Podcast. A new podcast episode will be available every 2 weeks, so make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app so that you can be notified when new episodes become available. But that's not where this ends, though. In addition to the podcast, I'm also introducing series on my website. These focus on some of my favorite areas in the region, complete with photos, trip reports, and the details behind my adventures. I created this in an effort to help others plan and prepare for their adventures in the great wilderness areas that make this region so special. A large part of the series pages are the trip reports that detail my adventures in the wilderness. These are always available on my Trail Notes blog, but now they're included in the series pages and filtered by the location, making it easier to find them. The reports provide details on the hikes, routes, trails, and locations that I frequent right here in the Great Lakes, and this year I'm actually going to take that one step further. I've started planning some exciting new videos that I will be sharing on YouTube that take you along for the experience and bring you right into the action as part of the Explore the Great Lakes series on my YouTube channel. The trip reports share the information behind the area that I hiked and the technical aspects of the trip. The video shares the experience and the photography. I'm going to be releasing a new YouTube video each month as this year's adventures begin. It's going to be a fun year. one filled with exciting discussions, adventures, guest speakers, and content. For those of you interested in keeping up with it all, head over to the podcast website linked in the show notes below and sign up for the monthly newsletter, which includes a recap of each month's new content. As mentioned, I've included links to everything in the show notes below so that you guys can check things out. As we close out episode 1, I want to leave you guys with this. As we start another year and share the excitement for all that is ahead, remember that photography and your time spent in nature is a personal journey. Always be hungry for more. Never let yourself become static or tell yourself there's simply nothing more to learn. Photography is a journey, not a destination. There's always something more to learn, experience, and grow from. Through community, supporting others, and being active in both, we can all contribute together. Photography itself is not static, it's evolutionary. It's a distinctive personal journey, a series of experiences unique to each of us. Solitary, enduring, unscripted. It is these moments, experiences, and encounters that we are going to explore, share, and experience together right here on the Lakescape Photography Podcast. I hope that you guys are excited and inspired, and I thank you for enjoying episode 1. Please don't forget to rate the show and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. I'll see you guys in 2 weeks. Take care, everybody.